Hey, what is up guys, MKBHD here, and it's been a long time coming waiting for the next Nexus. Why am I even talking about that? Well, this is the LG G2, aka the almost Nexus. Let me explain. Let's go back a second to the Nexus 4. When I first saw it, I said in my review that this was the perfect combination between the previous Nexus, the Galaxy Nexus, and LG's current flagship at that time, which was the LG Optimus G. And that's naturally what happens when Google picks LG for the hardware partner for the Nexus. LG adapts something that they're already making into something that works with what Google wants. So in terms of design, a lot of that Nexus's points came from the current LG flagship at that time, the Optimus G. Now flash forward to 2013, where the next Nexus is right around the corner. The hardware partner for Nexus is still LG, and this is LG's current flagship, the LG G2. So you can think of this as the sort of almost Nexus, a peek into what we'll probably see running stock Android 4.4 KitKat in a couple of weeks on a Google event stage. And you can also see in this device what LG thinks it takes to take down the Galaxy S4 as the most popular Android phone right now. And as it turns out, a lot of that involves copying what Samsung did with the Galaxy S4. First of all, though, there's no way around it. This phone is an absolute beast on paper. A lot of people don't realize it, but this phone flat out wins the spec war right now, if that's what you're into. It has a mighty Snapdragon 800 chip inside, a 2 gigabytes of RAM, 3000 milliamp hour battery in the United States, a 5.2-inch 1080p edge-to-edge display, and a 13 megapixel optically stabilized camera. In other words, it's a beast. I know we say specs don't matter that much, but it's kind of hard to deny that a device with these types of internals is going to perform well. But we'll get to that in a second. What's really unique, though, about this LG G2 is the actual design of the device and the button layout. You may have noticed that there are no buttons on the top, or on the right-hand side, or on the left-hand side, or on the bottom of the device. All of the buttons on the LG G2 are on the back. So it's an interesting choice. It really keeps the phone feeling sleek and clean, and after a few quick days of actually using it this way, I got used to it pretty quickly, which may seem weird, but what's nice is when you're holding the phone, your hands tend to fall nicely in line with those buttons on the back. Even if you don't have massive hands like me, I know I have big hands, but I've let other people try it, and the first reaction is usually, well, at least my fingers are right where I hold it. They land right on the buttons. Everything else about the design, though, is still similar to the Galaxy S4 that it's aiming at. They have a similar footprint, similar shape, similar curvature, and even very similar materials, though the G2 adds this metal band all the way around all the edges of the phone in an effort to feel, I guess, a bit more premium. And both devices also have a removable back coated with that super glossy plastic that I'm personally not really a fan of, but you can always add a case or a decal to the back like I did with my S4 later. But the G2 manages to have a slightly larger 5.2-inch HD IPS display with its much thinner bezels and on-screen buttons instead of Samsung's physical ones. And this display by itself is excellent for a smartphone. Brilliant brightness, so it's viewable just about anywhere, plus a super high pixel density, very good color reproduction for an IPS display, and it's scratch-resistant glass on top of everything. Literally, like a boss. Anyway, there are some other minor things about this hardware, like the downward-facing speaker, which is pretty good and kind of loud, but also kind of tinny, and fires audio sideways when the device is in landscape mode. And there's also this hilariously long TV antenna on the Korean version to get better reception for the pre-installed TV watching apps. Or you can use it to freak people out in the street if you want to convince people you have an insanely weird-looking phone from the 80s or something. But let's get back to those buttons for a sec. When the display is off, you can actually hold down those back buttons. You can use the volume up button to quickly open LG's Notes app, or the volume down button as a shortcut to open the camera, which is a nice touch. And speaking of the camera, it's a strong point on this device, which gives me a glimmer of hope for a great camera on the next Nexus. The camera on the LG G2 here is fantastic. Like, it takes great pictures and video, and it's thanks to that sensor, the glass, and the optical image stabilization. So the software, thanks to LG's skin, is a little bit ugly, and I'm not a fan of the viewfinder at all, really, but you can see exactly what they tried to do here. It's almost as if they said to their software engineers, hey, you see that Samsung Galaxy S4 camera feature? Your job is to build that into our camera. Boom, it's in. They have dual shot, they have the photosphere mode, everything is here. It's like Samsung added everything but the kitchen sink, and at the end of the day, the photos it takes are really quite good. They're top notch. I'd say the camera here is top 3 Android smartphone cameras I've ever used, although that may of course change very soon. But yeah, I've been impressed with the photos it takes in any kind of light, indoors or outdoors, and it opens the camera and takes all these photos very quickly thanks to that software shortcut and the, well, immense power of the Snapdragon 800. So that's what matters to a lot of people, and it's gonna get these shots really quickly and take them in great quality. So the long story short here is that from my experience, this is a potentially incredible device ruined by awful LG software, but yet gives me hope for the future at the same time. Because if the next Nexus physically looks anything like this, I'm going to be a very happy person. But all the biggest downsides for this device come from that LG skin on the top of Android. It's Android 4.2 with this incredibly large LG UI on top of it that I happen to think looks quite ugly, inconsistent, even a little bit tacky or gouty. I mean, there's unnecessary animations all over the place, distracting delays in the amount of time it takes for things to happen or to do things, changes just for the sake of changes, and overall just a ton of things that need to be cleaned up, and that's just the simple way of putting it. I mean, the first time I pulled down the notification draw, I think my jaw was on the floor at how bad it looked. Really, I think they can do a lot better in this department. But what's crazy is the biggest pro is the Snapdragon 800 doesn't even break a sweat. This phone is consistently fast, and it seems like the skin doesn't weigh it down at all. Maybe the skin isn't really all that heavy after all, or maybe the Snapdragon 800 is just that much of a beast. But it lasted all day with this crazy power too, thanks to the 3000 milliamp hour battery. So even if you are lost in the software and it takes you forever to do what you want to do because of all the animations or changes, you can still rest assured that it'll keep doing exactly what it's doing all day at lightning speed thanks to that chip, that's for sure. This phone is a screamer. But if I was to consider using the G2 full time, I would really wish it was a lot lighter, a lot cleaner, and I mean ultimately a lot closer to stock Android, like a Nexus. So at the end of the day, the LG G2 really is quite an interesting device. Obviously the biggest difference between it and just about any other device out there is the buttons on the back. And when people first see this for the first time, they're gonna think it's insane. Why would anyone have buttons on the back of their phone? That just doesn't make sense. On day 1 and day 2 of owning the phone, you might still think that, but on day 3, 4, and 5, you start to get to know where the buttons are. On day 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you really start to get used to it. And I've been using this phone for a bit now, and I don't even look at the buttons anymore, and I'm totally used to having them on the back of the phone. So that's pretty cool. But either way, the next Nexus won't have those buttons like we've said, but ideally, this is probably the body of the next Nexus, what we're looking at right here. Either way, thank you for watching. This has been a quick LG G2 full review. Feel free to give a thumbs up below if you enjoyed it. Very much more coming up soon, especially this week and next. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Peace.